KT McFarland's on the line right now. She is, of course, a Fox News national security analyst and host of FoxNews.com's DEFCON 3 show, which can be seen 1 p.m. on Wednesdays at live.foxnews.com. Hey, KT, how are you?
Good morning.
All right, I got this thing that this sort of raised an eyebrow for me. It sort of piqued my reporter curiosity. And when I learned that the President of the United States had the Big Four over to the White House yesterday. Big Four being, the Speaker of the House, the Minority Leader of the House, the Majority and Minority Leaders of the Senate, brought to the White House for a conversation. And when everybody said, well, what were they talking about? Immigration reform? All the No. They were talking about matters involving foreign affairs. And that said to me, oh my gosh, is something up with Syria? What do you read when you hear about a meeting like that?
Well, especially if it's a public meeting.
No,
like
it was off the record.
But it's public. It's acknowledged that they went.
It's acknowledged that they went, but it's not acknowledged. Nobody is talking about what they really discussed.
I think there could have been several things. If they could have been talking about Syria, and that's a likely thing to be talking about, because although the president's announced we're going to arm the rebels, the devil is in the details.
Right.
Which rebels? Where are you going to arm them? If you arm them, you got to train them. Are you going to send American troops there? Are you going to send contractors there? Where is there? So that whole area, which requires a lot of congressional consultation at a minimum.
Consultation, that's right.
And if you actually send troops, if you do a no-fly zone, if you're putting American troops in harm's way, then, could you trigger the War Powers Act? Secondly, they could have been talking about Snowden. I rather doubt it, because I don't think the president's going to do anything about Snowden. And the third thing they might do is because today there are the Benghazi hearings, and the Senate Armed Services Committee, for the first time, will be hearing from General Ham, who was the commander of the Africa Command, the combatant commander of the Africa Command during the Benghazi attacks. They'll also be hearing from a Colonel Fisher, I believe, who was the head of the equivalent of the Rapid Response Team out of Tripoli, and he's the one who's come forward, at least in one interview, and said, I was told to stand down. Those are closed hearings. They're off the record, but they're happening, I believe, later this morning. So maybe there's something with regard to that, like the president saying, don't go there, these are classified information, and here's why don't go there. I don't know.
I don't want to weigh on it too much, but it just seems to me that when you have troops that have been sent to Jordan along with a lot of equipment for war games, right next door to Syria, there to monitor the situation, and we know that they're now going to try to help the rebels in some way inside Syria. We're not clear exactly how that's going to take place because the president has not let that be known.
Right.
And then you have a meeting of the Big Four at the White House, and we know that it's about foreign relations matters. That sort of caught my attention as something that means that maybe something's up that we're going to hear about in the day ahead.
Yeah, I was just actually in Israel 10 days ago, and I was on that border, the Syrian-Israeli border. I was on the Israeli-Jordanian border. People don't understand how close everything is. It's sort of like driving 45 minutes from one end, from the Maryland suburbs of Washington to the Virginia suburbs of Washington. That's how close everything is there. And so if we are training in Jordan, who's doing the training? We have, as you said, we had a military exercise. We've left some of the military troops behind. What is their role going forward? And what happens if the situation in Jordan becomes explosive? I mean, for example, Jordan has a population of 6 million people, and the refugee camps are over 500,000, on their way to maybe even 1 million refugees that are there without food or water or any gainful employment.
Wow.
And that is a very destabilizing situation. It would be as if 50 million refugees arrived on the shores of America in a short period of time. How would we incorporate them? So it's a very explosive situation in the refugee camps. The guys who are the rebel fighters stay in the refugee camps in Jordan, run over the border and fight in Syria. Similarly, there's a worry that some of the same guys destabilizing Syria, the al-Qaeda affiliates, are now making home in Jordan to do the same there. So U.S. troops are there. American troops can do anything. I'm not worried about them. But what if the conflict spreads and they're still there?
Katie McFarland's our guest. And Katie, I got to ask you about Edward Snowden. I mean, this was such a spectacle. He's hiding out in Hong Kong. Then he flies to Moscow. And then he sort of pretends to fly to Ecuador via Cuba. But it turns out he's still in the airport in Moscow. America's demanding that Moscow send him back. They're saying to heck with you. China didn't care. Ecuador doesn't care. Have we completely lost any influence internationally in this nation? Does anyone even care what America demands or asks for
No,
anymore?
and that's the shame of it. They don't care. And even worse, the administration's unlikely to do anything about the fact that they don't care. These are the equivalent of diplomatic slaps in the face, what China did, what Russia did. And there's lame excuses like, the paperwork wasn't filled out, or, this is like the dog ate my homework.
Right, I lost it at the mail, dog ate it, yeah.
The dog ate my homework, so I couldn't, of course. But these are diplomatic slaps in the face. They feel that their President Obama is weak. They can get away with it. They don't think there are going to be any consequences to this. And think about what Snowden did. I mean, I was in China a month ago and saw the vice foreign minister and talked about cyber stuff. And I said, look, the biggest issue between us is cyber hacking, cyber theft. You're doing it to us. We're not doing it to you. And he said, no, you're doing it to us. He was very bristly. And he said, we're the victims. Well, there was no proof of that until Snowden went there. And now Snowden has given them something. My guess is that was the price of his entry, that he turned over information to the Chinese. Now he's in Moscow. He's turning over information to them. That's the price of their entry. And not only has he done harm to American national security interests by giving them all of this information, even if you can make the argument that the information should have been known by the American people, there's the second question, which is if Russia and China can slap America around now, who's next? Iran and Venezuela? They won't feel that there's any consequence.
Ecuador, apparently.
And then Ecuador and Cuba.
Yeah.
This is not...
Superpower Ecuador.
Yes.
Here's the thing. For years, and you guys and I, we've talked about this before, leading from behind is going to have consequences. And the basic consequence is if you're leading from behind, the guys in the front eventually stop looking back for orders. We now have demonstrable evidence that it's not working, and it is to the detriment of the United States. I think that Snowden could well be the turning point, crossing the Rubicon, the Jimmy Carter Tehran hostage moment for the Obama administration, the point at which nothing after this is the same.
All right. Well, KT McFarland, we'll leave it right there. Great to have you on the show.